Security stopped me at the conservatory's side entrance. The guard's hand went up before I could speak. "Guests only, ma'am." I clutched my simple navy clutch tighter, feeling the embossed invitation letter inside. The one from the ethics committee, not from my son. Behind the guard, I could see the glass ceiling soaking up afternoon light, casting rainbows across white roses that climbed 20 feet high. Vivian Harrow glided over in champagne silk, her smile sharp as cut crystal. "I'm sorry, but staff enters through the service corridor." She said it loud enough for 3 arriving couples to hear. My face burned. I opened my mouth to explain, but then Talia appeared in her rehearsal dress, lace trailing behind her like sea foam. Her eyes locked onto mine, and her expression shifted from confusion to something sharper. "Wait," she said, her voice cutting through the string quartet's warm-up notes. "You're Elise Turner. From Harbor and Hearth, aren't you?" The violinist missed a note. The conservatory went silent except for the fountain behind us. Vivian's smile froze. My son Noah stepped out from behind a massive floral arch, still in his dress shirt and slacks from the rehearsal. His face went pale when he saw me. "Mom." His voice cracked on the word. "You weren't supposed to. I mean, you weren't invited." He glanced back at Vivian, then at Talia, like a child caught between fighting parents. "Please don't make a scene." Something inside my chest cracked clean through. I tucked my hands behind my back, standing beside the vendor partition where the caterers were setting up champagne towers. My throat burned with words I couldn't say in front of all these people. But Talia's gaze hardened, not at me but at Vivian. She turned to her mother with a look I'd never seen on her face in the engagement photos Noah had posted online. "Mother," Talia said slowly, her voice steady as stone. "Wait just a minute. Harbor and Hearth paid for this entire venue, didn't they?" Vivian's hand fluttered to her pearl necklace. "Darling, sponsors are just faceless checks. They don't actually attend." 3 weeks earlier, I'd sat in the conference room at Harbor and Hearth's downtown office, staring at the file folder Kara had just slid across the table. "Harrow House Conservatory grand reopening," she'd said. "Major community sponsorship. You'll be point on vendor relations." I'd opened the folder and my stomach had dropped. There, in elegant script on the venue contract, were 2 names I knew by heart: Noah Turner and Talia Harrow. My son. My son who hadn't called me in 8 months. I'd looked up at Kara, my supervisor, and forced my voice to stay level. "The groom is my son. I need to recuse myself from any approval authority." Kara had blinked twice, then nodded slowly. "I'll loop in ethics immediately." Within an hour, I was sitting with Marco from the ethics committee, signing disclosure forms. Everything was documented. My relationship, my request to step back from final approvals, my acknowledgement that I couldn't use my position for personal benefit. Marco had been kind but firm. "We'll keep you on vendor coordination only. No budget authority, no guest list access." 2 days after my disclosure, Marco called me back into his office. "There's something you need to see." He pulled up the sponsorship contract on his screen and scrolled to page 7. Clause 7, Section C, Community Access Provision. The sponsor, that's us, gets 2 complimentary seats for community stakeholders. The selection committee chooses them, not individual staff members. I'd read it 3 times, my heart hammering. "Who's on the selection committee?" Marco tapped the document. "Department heads, community board representatives, and 2 rotating volunteers. You're not on it." He'd looked at me carefully. "The committee solicited nominations from staff. Someone submitted your name as a longtime community volunteer. Your library work, the meal programs you coordinate. The committee voted. Your name was chosen." I'd felt dizzy. I didn't nominate myself. Marco nodded. "We know. That's why it's compliant. You're attending as community recognition, not as mother of the groom. The committee doesn't even know he's your son. We kept that confidential." I'd stared at the clause until the words blurred. 4 days later, Vivian struck. Kara forwarded me the email chain with a note. "FYI, not your problem, but you should know." Vivian's message was 3 paragraphs of polite poison. "While we appreciate Harbor and Hearth's generous sponsorship, We feel strongly that the allocated community seats should be reserved for parties whose image aligns with the Harrow family legacy. We trust you'll understand the importance of appropriate representation at such an intimate celebration." Kara's response was surgical. She'd quoted Clause 7 word for word, copied legal, and closed with, "The community seats are contractually designated and non-negotiable. We're confident the selected stakeholders represent our shared values beautifully." Vivian's reply came within an hour. "Of course we respect your processes. Though I should mention that several other venues have expressed interest in partnership for future events. We do so value flexibility in our collaborators." It was a threat wrapped in silk. Kara had called me into her office after that. "She's trying to force your removal without saying your name. You know that, right?" Kara pulled up a financial analysis on her screen. Harrow House took out significant loans for the renovation. The grand reopening is make or break for their Q4 projections. If we pull sponsorship now, they'll lose their primary investor confidence. The venue could actually fold. She looked at me seriously. "Vivian's bluffing. She can't afford to lose us. But I need to know. Do you want to push this? We can hold the line on the contract, but it'll be uncomfortable." I thought about Noah, about the 8 months of silence after I'd refused to co-sign his condo loan. I thought about Talia, who I'd only met once at a coffee shop where she'd been polite and distant. "I won't weaponize pain," I said finally. "But I won't be erased either. Hold the line quietly. Document everything. If this becomes about power instead of policy, we'll have the paper trail." Kara nodded. "Compliance is already logging every communication. We're doing this clean." I left her office feeling something strange. Not quite hope, but not quite surrender either. Noah called me on a Tuesday evening. I'd been folding laundry, and when his name flashed on my phone, I almost dropped a towel. "Mom." He sounded exhausted. "Talia's mother says you're only coming to the wedding to flex your company connections. She says you're trying to embarrass us." The laundry basket blurred. I sat down hard on the couch. "Noah, there's a community access clause in the sponsorship contract. A committee chose me. I didn't put myself forward. I disclosed everything to ethics. I'm not trying to hurt you." Silence stretched between us. Then, quietly, "Talia's mom has been really stressed about the wedding. She thinks having you there will create drama. The press might twist it into some kind of story about estranged families." He paused. "I think it would be better if you didn't come. Even as the community representative. Can you just understand?" I hit mute and let myself cry without a sound, pressing a pillow to my mouth so he wouldn't hear. After 30 seconds, I unmuted. "I understand." My voice came out steady somehow. "Thank you for being reasonable about this," he said, relief flooding his words. We hung up. I cried until my ribs ached. I spent that night writing. One page, printed on plain paper, addressed to both Noah and Talia. "I won't fight for a chair if my presence genuinely harms your wedding day. But I also won't accept being erased from a room I helped create, or agree that my existence is inherently embarrassing. I'm offering to voluntarily relinquish the community seat if there's a truthful path forward. One where I'm not characterized as manipulative or attention-seeking. I've spent 20 years showing up for community work, because it matters, not for recognition. If that work earned me a committee nomination, I'm proud of it. But I'm also your mother, and I love you enough to step back if that's truly what you need." I sent copies to Noah, Talia, and Marco in ethics. Then I stepped back and let the policy people handle it. Marco called me the next morning. "The committee reviewed your letter. Their position is that retracting a community honor due to family pressure sets a dangerous precedent. You're attending unless you formally withdraw." I didn't withdraw. I also didn't fight. I just waited. The rehearsal walkthrough happened on a Thursday afternoon. I wasn't supposed to be there. Vendor coordination didn't require my physical presence. But the venue manager had called in a panic. "We've got a power fluctuation in the East Wing. The backup generator isn't kicking in, and the catering coolers are starting to warm up. The electrician they booked can't come until tomorrow." I'd grabbed my vendor contact list and called an electrician from Harbor and Hearth's preferred contractor network. He arrived within 90 minutes, diagnosed a tripped relay switch, and had power restored before any food spoiled. The fix was billed directly to the venue under existing maintenance terms. Standard, above board, no special favors. I'd stayed in the parking lot during the repair, coordinating by phone. I never went inside. But apparently the head chef had asked who'd arranged the emergency call, and the venue manager had told him. Word spread through the vendor network the way it always does, quickly and with gratitude. I only heard about it later, when the florist texted me. "You saved the whole weekend. That crew thinks you walk on water." The chef found me the next day during final setup. I was checking in with the rental company about chair deliveries when he crossed the conservatory floor, still in his whites. "Miss Turner." He extended his hand. "I wanted to thank you personally for yesterday. That call saved not just the food, but my team's reputation. We would have been ruined." Other vendors nearby looked up. The florist, 2 servers setting tables, the photographer adjusting his equipment. He thanked me loudly, warmly, like I'd done something heroic instead of just making a phone call. I felt my face flush. It was just protocol. Anyone would have done the same. But the murmurs pulsed through the room anyway. Near the entrance, Vivian stood with the wedding planner, her smile turning to ice as she watched the exchange. In the corner by the gift table, Talia was reviewing the seating chart. She looked up at the commotion, her eyes finding mine across the room. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. She watched me like she was recalculating something, measuring the distance between the story she'd been told and the woman standing in front of her. I excused myself quickly and left through the service entrance, my heart pounding. The final seating chart arrived in my email 2 days before the wedding. Marco had forwarded it with a single line. "Compliant per contract terms." I opened the PDF and found my name. Table 47. I had to zoom in to see where that was. Behind a structural pillar, next to the busing station where servers would be clearing plates all night. A small cocktail stool, not even a proper chair. Technically compliant, I had a designated seat in the venue. Emotionally punishing. I would see almost nothing of the ceremony and even less of the reception. I stared at that tiny square on the floor plan for a long time. Then I closed my laptop and pulled out my navy dress, the one I'd worn to Noah's college graduation. Simple, appropriate, forgettable. I ironed it carefully, steamed out every wrinkle, and hung it on the back of my bedroom door. I would not give Vivian grounds to call me unreasonable. I would not give Noah reason to say I'd caused drama. I would show up, sit on my stool behind my pillar, and bear witness to my son's happiness from the shadows. Dignity didn't require visibility. I repeated that to myself until I almost believed it. Wedding day arrived with crystalline sunshine. I drove to the conservatory alone, parked in the guest lot, and walked to the entrance in my iron navy dress and simple heels. Security waved through a parade of women in designer gowns and men in tailored suits. When I reached the door, the same guard from the rehearsal held up his hand. "Name." I gave it. He scanned his list, frowned, scanned again. "I don't see you on the primary guest roster." People were stacking up behind me now, curious and impatient. I pulled out the folded letter from ethics, committee designation, contract clause, legal authorization. The guard read it slowly, his frown deepening. Then he looked past me to where Vivian was greeting arrivals near the floral arch. He walked over to her, letter in hand. I watched them confer, watched Vivian's face tighten, watched her mouth form words I was glad I couldn't hear. The guard returned, handed back my letter, and stepped aside. "Enjoy the ceremony, ma'am." The rulebook had beaten the Rolodex. For now. I walked inside, past Vivian's frozen smile, and found my pillar. Everything from the opening scene rushed back. Talia's realization, sharp and sudden. Harbor and Hearth paid for this venue. Vivian's hiss. "Sponsors are faceless checks, darling." Noah's pale face, his stammered. "Mom, you weren't invited." And then Talia turning to him, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent conservatory. "Did you know your mother saved the rehearsal dinner from disaster? Did you know her company is the only reason we're standing in this room right now?" Noah opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked at me, then at Vivian, then at Talia. His hands hung useless at his sides. The string quartet started up again, trying to smooth over the tension. A wedding coordinator rushed forward, whispering urgently about the timeline. Vivian took Talia's elbow, trying to steer her toward the bridal suite. But Talia pulled free, still staring at Noah. "Did you know?" she repeated. Noah finally found his voice. We can talk about this later. Let's not do this now." Talia's jaw tightened, but she nodded once and let the coordinator guide her away. Vivian followed, throwing one poisonous glance back at me. "Turner, would you please stand?" My heart stopped. Every head in the room turned. I stood slowly, gripping the edge of my stool for balance. The vendor staff began to clap. Servers, the catering team, the florist, the photographer. A few guests joined in, uncertain but polite. The applause swelled for about 10 seconds, then faded. Vivian, seated at the head table, brought her hands together exactly twice in slow, deliberate claps. Then she stopped, her lips pressed into a thin line. Noah stared down at his plate, his jaw working. He didn't clap. He didn't look at me. I sat back down, my legs shaking, and wondered if I'd just made everything worse. I slipped away to the restroom during the salad course, needing a moment away from the eyes and whispers. I was washing my hands when the door opened behind me. In the mirror, I saw Vivian. She didn't pretend to be there for the restroom. She stood between me and the door, arms crossed. "You people," she said softly, venom dripping from every word, "don't belong at my family's table. You think a corporate sponsorship gives you the right to insert yourself into our lives." I dried my hands slowly, carefully. "I belong to the contract that kept your lights on," I said, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "I belong to the clause your lawyers signed. I belong to the community work that earned me a committee nomination. If you have a problem with any of that, take it up with your own signature." She stepped closer, and I could smell her perfume. Expensive, suffocating. "I will make sure you regret this," she whispered. My phone was in my clutch. I pulled it out and opened the voice memo app, hitting record, then tucked it back with the screen facing up. Not for leaks. Just for my own protection, my own memory. Later, alone in my car before driving home, I listened to the recording once. Vivian's threat was clear, unmistakable. I could send it to Marco, to legal, to Kara. I could build a case, file a complaint, turn this into a battle. Instead, I deleted the audio file. Then I opened my email and typed a quick, factual summary to Marco. Brief hallway interaction with Vivian Harrow, approximately 7 p.m. She expressed displeasure with my attendance. She stated she would ensure I regret this. No physical contact. I'm documenting for record-keeping purposes only. No action requested at this time. I attached a timestamp and sent it. No drama. No escalation. Just a documented interaction, clean and factual, the way Harbor and Hearth had trained me to handle vendor conflicts. Then I went back inside, washed my face in cold water, and returned to my stool. The main course was being served. Noah still wasn't looking at me, but Talia was. Every time I glanced toward the head table, her eyes were already on me, thoughtful and guarded. I didn't know what that look meant, but it felt different from pity. It felt like she was taking notes. After dinner, during the lull before dancing, Talia found me. She appeared beside my pillar without warning, her train gathered in one hand. "Miss Turner," she said quietly, "would you walk with me? Just for a minute. Away from the cameras." I nodded, too surprised to speak. We walked out through the conservatory's side doors into the garden, where fairy lights were strung through the trees. The music was muffled out here, the air cooler. Talia stopped by a fountain and turned to face me. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I let my mother control the guest list. She told me you'd embarrass the family, that you'd try to make the wedding about you, that you'd ask us for money in front of everyone." Her voice was steady but strained. "I should have questioned it. I should have called you myself." I looked at her, this woman my son loved, and saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine remorse. "Protecting optics shouldn't require erasing mothers," I said quietly. She winced. "No, it shouldn't." We stood in silence for a moment, listening to the fountain. Then she added, "Thank you for not making this uglier than it already is." When I returned to my stool, I found someone had moved another chair next to it. Ms. Patricia Wells, the library director, the other community seat, was sitting there, calm as anything. She smiled when she saw me. "No one sits alone on my watch," she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I felt something crack open in my chest. "Thank you," I whispered. She patted my hand. "I've known you for 15 years, Elise. I know what kind of person you are. And I know how this committee vote went down. You earned this seat 10 times over, and I'm honored to sit beside you." We stayed there together, talking quietly about library programs and community projects, ignoring the occasional curious glances from other guests. At one point, the photographer wandered over. A young woman with kind eyes and a camera full of candid shots. "You two look like you're having the best conversation of the night," she said. "Mind if I grab a quick shot?" We smiled, unscripted and genuine. She clicked the shutter twice, checked her screen and grinned. "Beautiful." It was the first photograph of the day where I didn't feel like I was being erased. Just grace caught in silver light. My phone buzzed during the cake cutting. A text from Marco. "FYI, post-event sponsor requirements include verified staff bonus pool for venue workers. Vivian signed off on it as part of final contract terms. We'll be auditing compliance next week. You doing okay?" I typed back. "I'm fine. Thank you for asking." But I wasn't fine exactly. I was something else, something steadier. This whole painful day had been documented, witnessed, processed through proper channels. Vivian could hiss threats in coat rooms. Noah could avoid my eyes. But the receipts were clean and the contracts were iron. When this was over, the story wouldn't be written by Vivian's version of events. It would be written by time-stamped emails, committee votes, and vendor testimonials. Not rage. Not revenge. Just reality, patient and persistent. I put my phone away and watched my son feed cake to his bride. Their laughter ringing through the conservatory. I'd given him life, raised him, loved him even when he stopped calling. And now I'd given him this too. A wedding in a venue I'd helped fund. Saved from disaster by a phone call I didn't have to make. He might not thank me today, but the truth would outlast his silence. During the parent toasts, Vivian took the microphone with practiced grace. Her speech was all elegance and edge. "Family," she said, pausing for effect, "is built on shared values. We choose the company we keep, the people we allow into our most sacred moments. Today we celebrate not just a marriage, but a joining of families who understand what it means to protect and honor what we've built." It was a jab thinly veiled, aimed straight at me. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. But then Talia leaned over and whispered something to the MC. He nodded, consulted his notes, and added an unscripted line when Vivian sat down. "We'd also like to thank Ms. Patricia Wells, the longtime library director who's kept our community's doors open late for students who had nowhere else to study. Ms. Wells, we're grateful for your presence here today." Patricia beamed and half stood, waving at the applause. Then she pointed directly at me and said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "Elise is the one who coordinates the meal programs that keep those students fed while they study. Let's thank her too." A ripple of applause followed, smaller but genuine. Vivian's smile turned brittle as glass. After the toasts, Noah finally approached. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, and stopped a few feet from my stool. "I didn't want drama," he said. It wasn't an apology. It was barely an acknowledgement. I looked up at my son, this tall, handsome man I'd rocked to sleep as a baby, taught to ride a bike, sent to college with everything I had. "You chose silence," I said quietly. "That's not the same as choosing peace." He flinched. Behind him, Talia was watching from the head table, her expression unreadable. Noah glanced back at her, then at me again. "Can we talk tomorrow? Really talk, I mean. Just the two of us." Something in his voice had shifted. Less defensive, more uncertain. I thought about saying no. I thought about making him feel what 8 months of silence had felt like. But I'd come here for truth, not punishment. "Yes," I said. "We can talk tomorrow." He nodded once and walked away. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was a door left unlocked, and sometimes that's enough to start with. Dignity doesn't mean slamming doors. It means knowing which ones are worth walking back through later. Near the end of the reception, the estate manager approached Vivian with a sealed envelope. I only noticed because I was watching the gift table nearby, making sure I could slip out before the bouquet toss. The manager's voice was low but firm. Final sponsor compliance documentation, safety audits, overtime verification, and the staff bonus release. I need your signature tonight per contract terms. Vivian tried to wave him off. Can't this wait until Monday? He didn't budge. No ma'am. Clause 12 requires same-day execution. Legal highlighted it here. He opened the envelope and pointed to a section marked in yellow. Vivian's jaw tightened. She pulled a pen from her clutch and signed with sharp, angry strokes. There. Satisfied. The manager took the papers, checked the signature, and nodded. Thank you. The venue staff will appreciate it. He walked away without ceremony. Vivian stood there for a moment, the envelope in her hand, her posture brittle as winter ice. Then she turned and saw me watching. Our eyes met across the conservatory floor. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at her until she turned away first. Small victories, built on contract clauses and proper procedure. Not spectacle. Just consequence. I found Talia later, behind the tent where the band was packing up equipment. She was sitting on a bench, her train pulled around her, looking exhausted and beautiful. Miss Turner, she said when she saw me. Elise, I corrected gently. She nodded. Elise, I need to tell you something. She took a breath. My mother told me you'd embarrass the family. She said you'd show up and beg for money, make a scene, try to guilt Noah into giving you attention. Her voice cracked slightly. She said you were manipulative and desperate. And I believed her because I didn't know you, and I trusted her. I sat down beside her, careful not to crowd her space. And now? I asked quietly. Talia looked at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Now I know she lied. You haven't asked for a single thing. Not money, not attention. Not even an apology you absolutely deserve. You just showed up with dignity and let the truth speak for itself. She reached for my hand. I'm sorry I didn't fight for you to be here. You already gave us more than money. You gave us grace. The word settled between us, fragile and true. As guests began to leave, the photographer found us and asked for a group shot of everyone who made tonight possible. She was gathering vendors near the entrance, caterers, florists, musicians. Talia stood and pulled me with her. She's coming too, she said firmly. I started to protest, but Talia shook her head. You belong in this picture. We stood together in a cluster of smiling, tired faces. The photographer counted down. 3, 2, Vivian's voice cut across the room. Excuse me, that's not. But the estate manager was standing beside her, the signed compliance paperwork in his hand. He said something low that I couldn't hear. Vivian's mouth closed. The photographer clicked the shutter. One single frame where I wasn't erased, wasn't hidden behind a pillar or a policy clause. Just present. Just real. When I saw the photo later, Talia texted it to me that night. I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I looked like I belonged. It had been so long since I'd seen that version of myself that I'd almost forgotten she existed. I saved the photo to my phone and stared at it until my eyes burned. Then I let myself cry, not from pain this time, but from something closer to relief. Noah walked me to the valet lane as the last guests trickled out. The conservatory lights were dimming behind us, and the air smelled like roses and champagne. I don't know how to fix today, he said. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, his tie loosened. He looked young suddenly, uncertain in a way I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Start with honesty, I said. Not just with me. With yourself. Ask yourself why you believed every story about me being a problem without ever asking my side. Ask yourself what you're really afraid of. He flinched but didn't argue. The valet brought my car around. I opened the door then paused. Noah. He looked up. I love you. That hasn't changed. But love doesn't mean I'll pretend this didn't hurt. It doesn't mean I'll make it easy for you to forget. I didn't hug him. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing under the fairy lights with the weight of his own silence. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let the space teach someone what absence feels like. I cried the whole drive home, but I didn't regret leaving him there. The next morning, Noah appeared on my porch at 8 a.m. with 2 coffees and swollen eyes that told me he hadn't slept. I let him in without a word. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework and taught him to fold origami cranes. I read it, he said. The sponsorship letter. The ethics clearance. The community access clause. Talia showed me everything. He set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. I believed every story, Mom, Vivian told me. Every single one. That you were manipulative, that you'd make a scene, that you were only there to embarrass us. I never questioned it because it was easier than dealing with the guilt of not talking to you for 8 months. His voice cracked. I was wrong, Mom. I was so wrong, and I don't know how to fix it. I didn't speak right away. Instead, I stood and pulled a cardboard box from the hall closet. Inside were photos from his childhood, birthday parties, soccer games, his high school graduation. I set it on the table between us. Start by remembering, I said. 3 hours later, there was another knock on my door. Talia stood there in jeans and a sweater, her hair in a simple ponytail, without a trace of makeup or yesterday's bridal armor. Can I come in? She asked. I let her in and made tea. We sat in my living room, the wedding photos still pulled up on her phone. Noah told me you two talked this morning, she said. I wanted to ask you something. Would you join us for dinner? Just the 3 of us. No press, no cameras, no theatrics. She looked at me carefully. I want the truth to start in a kitchen, not a ballroom. I want to know who you really are, not who I was told you were. I thought about it, weighing trust against caution. Yes, I said finally. But not if Vivian is there. I can't sit at a table with someone who threatened me and pretend we're family. Talia nodded immediately. Agreed. This is about us. You, me, and Noah. We'll build from there. She reached across the space between us and squeezed my hand. Thank you for giving us a chance to do this right. I squeezed back, and something small and fragile began to grow where resentment had been. Not forgiveness yet, but possibility. 2 days later, I got a text from an unexpected number. It was the head baker from the wedding. The one whose coolers I'd helped save during the power outage. The message included a photo. Her entire staff holding up envelopes, grinning ear to ear. The text read, staff bonuses came through. Vivian tried to reallocate the funds to administrative costs, but the venue manager held her to the contract. My team is getting paid overtime and holiday bonuses. Rent is covered. Kids are eating well this month. Thank you for being part of the company that made this happen. I stared at that photo for a long time. Real people, real lives, made a little easier because someone had written an ironclad clause and someone else had held the line when it mattered. This was the victory I'd wanted all along. Not a scene at a wedding. Not public vindication or viral revenge. Just justice landing quietly in the form of paid rent and full fridges. Dignity restored in envelopes instead of speeches. I texted back. I'm so glad. You all earned every penny. Then I saved the photo next to the one from the wedding. 2 small pieces of proof that showing up with integrity leaves marks the world can't erase. That Friday, Noah and Talia came to my house for dinner. I made lasagna, Noah's childhood favorite, and set the table with mismatched plates because I'd never bothered buying a fancy set. We sat together in my small dining room, and for the first few minutes, nobody spoke. Then Talia asked about the photos on my mantle, and I told stories about Noah as a toddler, and slowly the ice began to crack. We laughed. We cried a little. At one point, Noah asked, "Will you forgive me?" I set down my fork and looked at him. Forgiveness is a road, not a switch. You're free to walk it, but it takes time and I can't promise when we'll reach the end. I'm still your mother, and I still love you. But trust is rebuilt with consistent honesty, not with one conversation. He nodded, his eyes wet. I can do that. I want to do that. After dinner, I pulled out the vendor photo, the one the photographer had taken of Talia and me with all the workers who'd made the wedding possible. I slipped it into a simple wooden frame and set it on the bookshelf beside Noah's graduation picture. Not as a trophy. Not as a weapon to remind him of his failure. just as a reminder to myself that I'd walk through fire and come out with my dignity intact, that I'd been tested and hadn't broken, that grace under pressure leaves its own kind of legacy. My phone buzzed. A message from Marco. Final compliance audit complete. All contract terms fulfilled. Staff bonuses verified and distributed. Harrow House sponsorship officially concluded. Well done, Elise. I read it twice, then set my phone down and looked around my small dining room at my son and his wife, at the mismatched plates and the leftover lasagna, at the life I'd built quietly and carefully over decades of showing up. The following week, I met Patricia for coffee at our usual spot downtown. She slid a newspaper across the table. The local section had run a small feature on the Harrow House reopening. There was a photo of the conservatory, the grand staircase, the champagne fountain. And buried in the third paragraph, a single line. The renovation was made possible through community partnership with Harbor and Hearth Industries. No mention of drama. No family scandal. Just facts, clean and permanent in print. You did good, Patricia said, stirring her coffee. You walked through hell in heels and didn't set anything on fire. I laughed, surprising myself. I wanted to sometimes. She smiled. But you didn't. That's the difference between revenge and dignity. Revenge burns everything down. Dignity builds something that lasts longer than the pain. I thought about Noah's promise to walk the road toward forgiveness. I thought about Talia's text that morning asking if I wanted to go wedding dress shopping with her friend next month. Not as obligation, but as invitation. I thought about the baker's team with their bonus envelopes and full fridges. Yeah, I said quietly. I think maybe it does. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote an email to Kara and Marco. I wanted to thank you both for holding the line during the Harrow House sponsorship. There were multiple opportunities to bend the rules, to make exceptions, to prioritize comfort over compliance. You didn't. You held me accountable to our ethics policies, and you held Vivian Harrow accountable to her signed contracts. Because of that, staff got paid, community members got honored, and I got to witness my son's wedding with my head held high. That's not a small thing. That's the entire thing. I sent it and closed my laptop. Outside my window, the street was quiet under the amber glow of streetlights. Somewhere across town, Noah and Talia were probably curled up on their couch, starting their married life. Somewhere else, Vivian was probably still seething about contracts and clauses she couldn't control. And here I was, in my small house with my mismatched plates and my hard-won peace, exactly where I belonged. The wedding was over. The contracts were fulfilled. The story was finished. But the road, the long, uncertain road toward rebuilding what had been broken, was just beginning. And for the first time in months, I felt ready to walk it.